Okay, hello and welcome to the multi-parent rigging tutorial. So in this tutorial we're going to go through this script and what it can do and how it can be applied. So firstly we've got the UI. So on here we have a toolbar and the first button is the settings button. This is actually all about the controllers or the targets and how they're used. So you can use nulls or solids and you can control the size. Get rid of that, come into the guide. Inside the guide we have the simple version number, who it was made by, you'll have if it's registered or not, you can deactivate or activate the license, you can get support, video guides, and also you have a short description inside just to quickly outline some of the functionality. On the far right of the toolbar you have an advanced button. So this simply allows access to the advanced parent settings once they've been applied. You then have 4 checkboxes on the left. These are P for position, S for scale, R for rotation, and T for opacity, and any combination of these can be applied. You then have a controllers option. So the controller will allow you to keep your current expressions on the layer that it's on. And I'll go into that in a bit more detail later on, but for now just bear with me. You then have the targets, so this is going to automatically add targets and add them to your parent on your comp. You then have a slider which allows you to determine how many parents you would like to add to your current layer. You can add 0 to 10. You then have a create parents button, what's simply just going to add the parents onto your selected layers. You then have a bin, what's going to remove all of the parents, controllers, and targets that are linked to the currently selected layer. So first we're going to go over how to apply the parents to your layer using the 4 checkboxes on the left. So in my simple setup here, I have a character who's been rigged up, just so you're aware of it. On the right hand, we've got the effects controls open for this. We're going to add the position property as a parent, and we're going to add 1 for now. If I click the create, this is simply going to add a parent to the effects panel. Inside here you have a target. The target is the layer that you're going to select in which you want the connection to connect with. So in this example, if I was to have this to C hand, then the connection, depending on the value of this, is going to connect or disconnect to that C hand itself. In the properties, you have the properties that you can actually turn on and turn off, what connected to the connection. So the more properties that I add, of course, the longer this would be. I've only added the position property, so only the position is set. If I was, say, for example, to add now scale and rotation, then once I click the create layers button, it's going to give me a little warning, and this warning is basically just a reminder to tell you what's actually happening and what's going on with the parents. So because the current parents have different properties to the ones being added, so your current parent only allows the position and you're trying to add scale and rotation onto this layer's parents, then it's actually going to delete this parent and delete all keyframes from this parent. So that's something to remember, that when you're adding these in and you're changing them about, if you're adding more, it's going to delete the ones you currently have and the keyframes related to it. So if I click OK, then all it's done is come in, add this new parent, and as you can see it has the position, scale, and rotation. If I was then to add the opacity, same thing, it's going to say it's different, it's changed. So it's important just to remember that. So normally what I do is just add them for everything, but you don't have to, it's completely your choice. So now we have the slider here. So the slider determines how many we can add, and if the values are the same, then I can add and take as many as I like. So currently I have 1 parent. The same values have been selected, position, scale, rotation, and opacity. And if I was to add 3, if I click this, it simply adds 3. When you do this, your keyframes for your parents will not be deleted because the values here are still the same. If I was to add 9, it would add 9. If I was to say I only wanted 2, I can add 2. If I was to change what I'm doing, pop position and opacity, and now do it with 5, it'll give me that warning that something is different, so it's going to change. And inside here, you can see that position and opacity is now my current property list. Then change this back to all of them, change it to 2, add them in, something's different of course, and now simply got properties for 2 parents. We're now going to take a look at using the controller. So like I said before, the controller allows you to keep your current expressions on your layer. So for my hand here, if I was to open up the position and add in, let's say actually delete everything in there so everything's gone. Let's say to add a wiggle. There we go. So now we've got a little wiggle going on where it's just wiggling around, doing its own little thing. Now if I wanted to keep that wiggle and still be able to parent the different things, all I have to do is take this text box here. When I create it now, what's going to happen is actually going to add a controller to your scene. The controller of course is the same position as what your hand is, and now you have parent 1 and parent 2 added onto here. So parent 1, parent 2, connection, everything's fine, and your wiggle is still happening. Now if you wanted to add more, instead of selecting the controller, you actually select the original layer, change the value here, and add them in. This will actually add them onto the controller for you. You don't have to do anything about that. Come back down, it'll put 1 as the controller. If you wanted to delete this, then all you do is actually set the main layer, click the delete, and now everything's deleted. The next option is targets. And to demonstrate this, I'm just going to remove the controller so I don't have to switch between layers all the time, and click targets. I'm going to add in 3 targets. So what this will do, this will automatically add 3 targets into my scene as nulls, because this is what I have set up here. And then I can drag these, parent them, and do what I want with them. As you can see, the C hand, the parent 1, parent 2, and parent 3, their targets have automatically been set to the correct target. So now all I have to do, if I wanted it to be parented to target 3, with this one over here, come over to my hand, parent 3, properties, position, connection, turn this up, and as you can see it's moving over to that layer now. And it's coming back. Nice and simple. If you wanted to delete these, all you do is you select your hand, you then click delete, and everything's gone. If you wanted to change how many you have, again it's the same concept. You move your slider, select the original layer, add them in, or remove them, and they'll be removed. And delete them off if you don't need them. Now we're going to run over what the advanced settings allows you to have access to. So everything else is the same. Of course, selecting the properties are going to give you different things that you're allowed to edit, different sliders. So if I was to create this on the hand with just 1, so I can quickly run through it. Over here you have parent 1. You have your global. Now this is slightly different. Your global now has a use global properties. When your use global properties is ticked, it's going to look at the properties here, see what else is available. So if you have nothing ticked and you're using this connection, then nothing's going to move. If you set it to position and scale and then use this, it's going to use the position and scale of whatever your target is. At the moment it's itself. If I was to say foot for whatever reason, just to show you a demonstration, then you can see it's working. If I remove the position and then try to do it, nothing is going to happen. The same with if you was to disable the use global properties, this is again ignored. So this is just a safety measure to make sure that if you're using global properties, then this is set. Otherwise, nothing. You then have access to your advanced settings. So the advanced is where you're able to control the X, Y, and Z, the X, Y, Z and invert for scale, the X, Y, Z and invert for rotation, and the opacity and invert opacity. So if I wanted to set the X position only, then this means this layer now is controlled by this, meaning the X is moving to my foot. It's like head, knees, shoulders, knees and toes, just a very weird version. And then your Y, of course, controls the Y. So now you have individual access to be able to move these sliders where you like. If this is set here, if this is moving up and down, the value is still there. So you can still move this up and down. But the X is being controlled by that other layer. If I was then to remove this, it goes back to its normal value. If I was to set the Y, then of course the X still works, but the Y is now locked to this foot, what means the Y of this foot layer is controlling that hand. And as you can see, very bad quality coming up now, but you can see that hand is now tied to this foot on the Y axis, and this hand here is tied to the X. And if I remove this, then it'll go back to its normal original position. If it was keyframed, then it would do its keyframe animation here. If I was to add two of these, nice and simple, I can add in two. Now I have two for the hand. I have them on the position, scale, and rotation. What I actually want is I just want the position. So I'm going to show you that you can actually combine multiples of these effects together. So if I open up the advanced, open up the position, I want this to be, what should it be? Let's go for head, and let's go hand or foot, and then we say that the X position is going to be equal to the foot. So now that X position is equal to this, but the Y position I want it to equal the head. So now it's a mess, but this X position is being controlled to that foot, and at the same time it's using the Y position from this. So you can actually parent to multiple objects and combine all of the effects together. If you was to switch this and say, actually, I wanted to use the global properties, enable the global properties, enable the position, and then switch this up. And as you see, it changes from the original position back to the global. Remember, at the point of 0, it acts as if this is not turned on, and that's because there's no connection. So it's going to use this value here. So if you'll see when I turn this on, it starts to move from its original position. That's because of this. If I switch this back to 0 and now do it, it's absolutely fine. Now to show you how this would actually transform your animation. So what we're going to do is we're going to add just one parent with all the properties. Actually, we're going to add a target for this. So it's automatically going to generate me a target, so I don't have to do it. Bring my target over. I'm then going to animate the position for this target, just up and then down. And then all I'm going to do is make another keyframe just over here, ease them, and I'm going to make sure that these are looped. Okay, so now they are currently looped. That null's going to just keep moving up and down, up and down. On my hand, I'm then going to set the target to be this target 1. It's already added actually because of the targets that I've set up here. It's already added. Then I can go into my global properties. I'm going to use the global properties. I'm going to use the position. There's no rotation, but I'm going to turn it on anyway. I'm then going to set this value to 100%, and now it's actually going to follow that null object. I can then animate this connection, turning it on, turning it off, and as you'll see, it stops. And then I could start it again, and you'll see it gets connected again. So you can make very smooth transitions between animations. And as you can see, inside my hand position, there's actually no keyframes. So the effect you're getting is all from that null. Terrible animation, but you can see the effect. If you was then to add rotation to this, then you'll actually see the hand is already rotating to mimic that. And if I turn it on, you'll see that the hand is now rotating to the same values as what that null is if it's looped. Just going to show you. There we go. So now that hand is rotating constantly to whatever the null is doing, and it's using that. Now then, if I was to actually turn this off, so it starts connected and then it turns off, it will actually use its own position data if it is in there. So if I added a keyframe, added in a keyframe here, added in another keyframe back over here, F9, drag the speed out. Okay, so now you'll have this up and down motion, but now it moves back to its own animation. So if you have your own keyframes, regardless if they overlap or not, doesn't matter at all. It's going to use the slider to connect to whatever you like. So if I know that it's moving back here, if I wanted the slider to say be connected to that null again, if I set it to 100, it's going to move to that null. As you can see, it's ignoring its current keyframes. Even if I was to put them in again, it ignores them unless this is set to the value of 0. As you can see, it's moving back and forth. So this creates modular animation. You can set up a bunch of nulls to do lots of different things, connect them on and off to change your current animation, and still have your own values that you want to use. So if I come over to my other tutorial, this is a much more simple and basic version, but what I'm going to do is just demonstrate the 3D capabilities and the individual settings of the advance here. So if I was to add two parents, because I have two parents I want to connect to, add these in, come into my object, I've actually added the targets, I'm going to delete that, get rid of the targets, there we go. So the first is target 1 and the second would be target 2. So we're going to open the advanced settings here on each one of these. And what I want this to do is I want it to copy the rotation of the parent 1. So to copy the rotation of parent 1, I come down here, come into the Z rotation, and it's going to copy that rotation. If I try to copy the Y rotation, I don't get any errors or anything, it just doesn't do anything because the layer itself is not 3D. No 3D, it's not 3D, this is 3D, but it's not going to copy the rotation because it doesn't exist. The Z rotation, of course, does work because it's a flat plane. Now, if I wanted to get the rotation of my second parent, I can come into my rotation Y of my second parent and copy this, and because this is 3D, and the target is 3D, I can then copy its rotation. I can then do that for a mix of properties. And as you can see, I'm actually mixing the properties here. I'm taking properties from two different parents and putting them together. I could then invert my rotation. So this is going to invert my second parent. And if I was to invert this one as well, you'll see it gets inverted. And now they're inverted properties. If I wanted the position to move to that current position, all I have to do is grab the X, and now the position is linked to this position's X, meaning this Y doesn't do anything, but the X moves it. If I then wanted to say, okay, I wanted the Y position to be connected to the second parent, now this parent here is controlling the y, doesn't do anything on the x. This controls the x. Come back over to my object. Do you control the x? Do you control the y? Now I could work in z as well. So z is going to push it to the same distance as this. And then of this z, it's going to do the same, bring it back. So when they're both set to 100%, they're actually technically 50% between them. So an easy way to show you this is if I actually use the y values. So y brings it down, and then the y position for this brings it back up. And as this decreases, it goes back to the top. As this one decreases, it goes to the bottom. And if I set them both to 0, of course, it stays the same. Now this is dynamic in how it works. So if I set the y position to 100% and this to 100%, it's now 50% between these two objects. Meaning that if I was to move this, that y is staying constrained to 50% between them both. It looks a little bit different because this is actually set in z depth, so it's actually further away than this object. I could then stop doing this. I could come into my scale, and this scale is slightly larger. I can increase the scale of the x, increase the scale of y. I can then of course come into my scale x over here, decrease it, increase my scale y. So these are the advanced settings, and you combine as many parents as you like together. Now if you was to use the global settings, all you have to do is make sure that the text, say for the position, now the position is going to copy that position over there. If you wanted to copy the scale, rotation, now it's going to copy the scale and rotation to that property. If I then use the other property, it's then going to copy exactly the same thing. But as you notice, that layer over there has a different rotation. Turn the rotation on, turn the opacity on, and now it's copying everything that layer does. And that's practically it. It's so simple, yet super effective. Just as a really quick bonus, it does work with parented objects. As you can see, this is currently parented to the layer above it. If I was to select this, move it in, it comes to its parent. Now if this was to move, it still moves correctly. If I was then to disconnect it, come into the advanced, only allow the X position. Now the parent is controlling the X, and not the Y.